All right, so how are you guys doing? Good. Mostly? So I appreciate all of you that have contributed to the discussion board and voiced your concerns. It sounds like a lot of people are having problems with time management, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. And that's perfectly reasonable. You went from, having the whatever time your high school started till it ended, very structured days, and now you're in class probably half that time, maybe a third or 2/3 or something. And so you're left with a lot of time and you don't know what to do with it. And then you don't have home responsibilities. And for you guys, which is amazing right now, which you won't appreciate till you're old, if you're hungry, you can just walk to the quarterdeck or something else. You don't have to actually make food. That's how I spend my Sundays. Is like on days like today, I can't get home to make dinner, so I have to have something, and my husband doesn't cook, so he has to be able to reheat it. That's like the extent of his cooking. He doesn't make dinner; he makes reservations. So that's something else that I have to, a lot for in time wise. So it's like weekend, I got to do the grocery shop and then prep vegetables and get things ready for those kinds of things. And or on days where I have I'm here till 5 with lab. I have to be able to get dinner on the table by 5:30 or something. So it has to be something quick. So at least you don't have that, aspect to worry about. Probably your things now is fitting meals in when there's meals available, right? So quarterdeck, what time is that open? Only certain times, right? Yeah. Breakfast? 7:30 until like 10 or something? 9:30. Okay, and then what time did they close after dinner? 6:30. So I'm an early eater. Like 11 o'clock is lunch. I would eat dinner at 4 if I could, but it's not reasonable for me. So for me, I could fit that in. But some of you eat lunch late because you get up later, and then by the time you're hungry for dinner, it's like, oh crap, the quarterdeck's closed. But at least you have the galley, right? A couple of other options. Other places that you're trouble with other than time management. Let's see. Balancing chemistry and biology. So right now, probably your classes are relatively easy because maybe some of it's review and you're going to start getting into new material, or if you're organic chemistry, it's probably all new right now and moving pretty quickly. The big advantage that you guys have right now is most professors are recording, so you can go back and watch those. And if you are taking notes and there's a section that you're just absolutely lost in, put a sticky note or something, a note in there to go back to that part in the video. If you happen to know what time it is, that would make it even more efficient. So you know where to go to in the video without watching the whole thing if you don't need to. So things will pick up, which time management will help with that. Some of you need help with sig figs. If that is the case, there is an explanation also extra that's different maybe for significant figures in the lab manual. So check the appendix of the lab manual that has a section on sig figs. I can help with that. I know about sig figs. Other stuff in general chemistry, I think up till, for a while you got me. 116 I can't help you very much with, but 115 I can for the most part. Let's see. Some students, not studying enough for some areas and too much into others. If you have that problem, then you're already aware of something. But if you're studying it and you already know it and you know it and you know it, then you're studying it too much. Take a step back from it and yes, focus more time on things that you're not knowing how to do. Some people are homesick. Call your family. They probably miss you also. And let's see. If you've taken too many credits, if there's a way to reduce that load, if you don't need one of those classes, you can consider dropping that or trying to manage your schedule a little bit better. Okay. And we'll address some of those things today with our academic strategies. Okay, so the professors up to some extent we're here to guide you. Can you guys see the screen okay? We're here to guide you in your journey to success, but you also have to take a role in that as well. So we'll help you where we can, but you're also responsible for that. All right, so here is a new question. In the last week, how many days have you felt overwhelmed? many days have you felt overwhelmed? All right, everybody need a couple more seconds. I'm closing the poll. All right, so some of you, most of you are 3 to 4 times in the last week. Some of you are having this overwhelming feeling every single day. So we want to try to work on fixing that. Okay, so that was that slide. So we can see where you are, and if you guys can see the statistics for everybody, how everybody voted. So you're not the only person that has felt overwhelmed. If you're in the 0 boat, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really great. Maybe you have everything under control, or maybe we just, you know, cut off your week a little bit different. Maybe tomorrow it's going to be your overwhelming day. I'm not cursing that on you, but it could happen. Okay, so you're not alone. Nobody that does well in college does it by themselves. So you want to keep that in mind when you're going through something. And you also want to remember that if you don't have all the answers, that's okay. I don't have all the answers. I don't know what the meaning of life is. I don't want to know what I want to be when I grow up. When people ask me for a 5-year plan, if I would have predicted my 5-year plan, like where I am now, is not here, not necessarily here, but as my role at this institution would have been different. So nobody has all the answers. You know that you can do it. You didn't get into college by accident, right? Nobody just you filled out an application, you did your prospective visit, the admissions board accepted you, and so it wasn't an accident or a fluke. How many of you, I think everybody would have taken you took ACTs or some kind of SATs or something. So you're not in the group of this fall that didn't have or probably won't have to do any of those things because of the COVID. Which will be an interesting experiment, right? So if they get into school, so we can look 5 years from now, all those students that come in next fall, having not taken any entrance exams, is the ACT really a predictor of how well you're gonna do in school? So that's gonna be, I think that'll be an interesting study, because who's a bad test taker? I did not do well on my ACT. Did you guys do the SAT or ACT? SAT. I did not take the SAT, but I didn't do well on my ACT. And I have a PhD. So how you do on a test is not going to indicate how well you do in life. So if you're having a hard time right now, you're not the only person. You guys belong here. You chose to come here and you're still here. So that's great. Again, you didn't get here by accident. And does anybody know what imposter syndrome is? So that's when you are just kind of walking your day and you think that you're living a fake life because you have these things and you don't think that you should. You guys are not imposters. You worked hard to get here and you deserve to be here. So remember, you're not alone. Okay, so we did this. Did I just go backwards? I did. You're also an individual. So your journey has already been different than the person next to you. You're different than your roommate. It's different than your siblings if you have siblings, or even if you have, does anybody here a twin? If you have twins, you still even grew up in the same family. You have different experiences. So your journey is going to be different. Your roommate's path to college is different than yours. Maybe you had a long line of people that went to college before you, or you're first person in your family. Who's the first person in their family to go to college? That's awesome. That's great. And so everybody's themselves, and don't try to duplicate somebody else's college experience. That's when you start to get into trouble, is when you're trying to do things that don't feel right to you. So make sure that you're accepting of yourself as an individual. And if you have to change paths or change your majors, that's okay. I started pre-med. I think I told you guys that. And I switched to just straight chemistry. And then my mom, who had great aspirations of me becoming a doctor, didn't talk to me for a couple months. But she got over it. She's fine now. And it's fine. You change your major. I did the EMT thing, and after something, I just didn't like the whole medical thing. It was just weird. So you just have to do what feels right for you. So if you have to change paths, that's okay. If you change your majors, that's fine. If you are I'll use cannabis as an example because we've seen a couple of these now. So if you're cannabis chemistry, and chemistry and science in general is not your strong suit, like it's terrible. And let's say you get through a couple of years of classes and you just kind of squeak by, maybe you figure out that maybe cannabis chemistry is not for you. Maybe you switch to cannabis business and that's okay too. You're still using the same area of study, but you're just putting it in a different focus. Maybe you want to focus on entrepreneurship or something like that and building a business rather than being in the lab. Maybe you like being in the greenhouse with all of the plants. And that doesn't require a cannabis chemistry degree. Or same thing with forensic chemistry. If you're in that path, a lot of our forensic chemistry majors actually take chemistry. They get through organic chemistry, they take biochemistry, and they decide that biochemistry is awesome, and then they switch to biochemistry. So we've lost quite a few students from forensics to biochemistry, and that was just a change due to interest. So if you have to change majors, that's fine. Don't feel like you're a failure for having to change majors. That's not what it is. You're still gonna leave here after 4 or 5 years, depending on what change you're making with the degree. And then again, don't waste time comparing yourself to others. Okay, so don't procrastinate. I heard some of you talking about procrastination. Do it now because sometimes later becomes never. One way to get through this is to do a little bit of the work every day and then just do a little bit at a time. If you just wanna try to do 2 of your online homework problems for chemistry, just to see how that feels. If that feels like that was enough and it took you 20 minutes to get through those 2 problems, that's 2 problems that you've already done. You don't have to worry about those 2 problems later. So just do a little bit and then try to knock things out a little bit at a time. Don't take a day or a weekend off unless you have done enough work to say, I can take the whole day off, which you could have done. That happens to me every once in a while, and then I don't know what to do with myself. So if you have a to-do list or you have a test coming up or a paper that is coming up due, don't take the day off or take a weekend off. Sometimes if you are going home, hopefully you're not traveling downstate where there's hot areas right now, or at Central where they're suspending or fining students if they're behaving poorly. So at least you're not at Central right now. So I know that some students, and I did the same thing, when you go home for the weekend and you take your laundry, which does get done because you or your mom do it with free laundry, and then you bring all your books home like you're gonna study, and that doesn't happen. Try not to do a little bit, even if it's a little bit, just crack the cover open a little bit. Again, do 2 online homework problems, and then at least you've done something for the weekend. Make the time for it, and then here we're gonna talk about managing your time. Questions yet, or anything that's come up? Okay. Prioritize and plan ahead. Really efficient people will plan out their weeks to be productive. And a good way to do this is to put the syllabi test dates or paper due dates in your planner or calendar. I know with the lab rotation right now with Chem 115 is very confusing to a lot of people. So this week, the second half of the alphabet was coming to lab. And then the first half of the alphabet should be working on the dry lab, which is in the lab manual, right? And then, so if you don't think that you're gonna remember if you went to lab this week, in 2 weeks that you have to go again, then put it in your calendar. Like, I have lab this day. And then if you wanna put in for next week, you can just put in the assignment for next week's lab is gonna be a virtual lab so that you remember to do it. So just like that. So even though your lab doesn't meet next, let's say you had Monday at 2 o'clock, if you pencil out that time like you're gonna do your lab, then you've already created that time. So you could think of it as free time, or you could use it as productive time. So this is when you would normally be doing lab. Why not just do the lab and then you're done with it for the week? So you can put those dates in your calendar. I do the same thing. So when I have quizzes and exams planned for my classes, I put them in my calendar so I remember to write them, because I forgot. I didn't put it in my calendar this week. I have an exam that I have to give on Friday and I haven't written it yet. So I need to do that in the next 2 days. So that was poor planning on my part because I had other things on my to-do list. So build habits in your planning. If you know things that are coming up, go ahead and put them in your calendar. How many people use a planner or calendar? If you don't, it's a good idea to start doing that now. I think it looks like the LSSU app has something like that. I just use Google Calendar and then the Google Task for my to-do list, which you can put dates on also. So you can also find friends that will hold you accountable. So you have, I heard of somebody talking about a cannabis chemistry study group or something. If you have something like that, you study together. And then your friends hopefully can guide you, or you can guide each other in whether you're doing too much or whether you're not doing enough. So it's good to have a group like that to let you know if you're studying enough or not. And then if you talk to a couple of different people, let's say you're doing your biology homework together, you can kind of see what they know. And if they know something that you don't know, maybe you guys should both try to switch knowledge there. Okay, so some of you talked about procrastination, etc. If you did this here, what is actually taking up most of your time right now? So you can pick one. What thing is actually taking up most of your time? Let me close the last poll here. Oh, I don't know how I did that. I wonder if it'll let me start it again. Let me try. I don't think it'll let me start it. All right, let me try a workaround. Okay, I set it as a pre-class for September 1. So hopefully you should be able to answer it, even though I ended class on accident. Are you guys able to see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is actually taking up most of your time right now? All right, so it looks like most of you have responded. The highest option, because I don't know how to close this when it's a pre-class activity. So you can't, can you see the response? Oh, you can, okay. So the hanging out with friends is taking up the most of your time right now. And that may not be the best way to be managing your time. Hanging out with friends is great. Hanging out with friends while studying is even better. So maybe you can, multitask and do some of those things together. Some of you are keeping up with studying and taking notes, it looks like, and then some are just doing nothing. So if you're in the doing nothing category, you might want to reprioritize where you're spending your time. Extracurricular activities are great for your resume, but unless you're really ahead in all of your classes, spending all of your time doing extracurriculars may not be the best plan. Okay. So some of you mentioned that studying, you're not sure what to study. And so whenever I'm working on a task, not necessarily studying, but things that I have to do, I kind of ask myself, where is my brain right now? Can I do a mindless activity? So editing videos is not mindless. That requires a lot of concentration because I have to listen to a lot of things to be able to edit it out. So that takes a lot of concentration. So I can't do that. But if there's something that I can do, like creating assignments on Moodle so that you can submit things, like that doesn't take a lot of energy. That's something that I can do while I'm listening to music. And then I can do that. So that's something that requires less things. If you are a person that likes to listen to music or a wide range of music, there's some music that I can't listen to without singing along or bopping or dancing. So that is not going to help me be productive if I'm going to be singing show tunes while doing things. So that's like reserved for things like laundry, but I can't work. Also, I shouldn't be singing in my office. That would be really embarrassing. So I can't be doing those types of things at work. So you just kind of have to look for where is your brain the most productive. If you have 9 o'clock class, what time is 1:15 at noon? That's a hard time. But let's say you had your Gen Chem at noon. You get breakfast at some point in the morning if you're a breakfast eater, and you didn't have any classes until noon. If that's a good productivity time for you, study up your Chem 115 before class. If it's not productive, then maybe you can knock something else out. If there is an assignment for USEM, probably doesn't require a ton of brain energy. No offense to anybody in this class, but right, this is not meant to be a difficult class. But there are things that you can do for the class, or maybe some of your other classes aren't as difficult. So if you can use that time productively, that is a good plan. Is there something easy or fast that you can do? Some of you mentioned that it might have been the other class. Somebody felt bad that they were doing their easy homework first and they thought they should be doing the hard stuff first. No, do your easy homework first. That's gonna take less time and then you'll actually have time to do it. It's the same thing when you're taking exams. If you have an exam in front of you, unless the tests are given in a certain order, you don't have to do it in order. Do the ones that you know how to do quickly. So don't spend 15 minutes on the first calculation that you didn't know how to do. You might run out of time for the rest of the test. So make sure you knock out all the stuff that you can do your test out of order, take control of the test. All right, so if you have stuff that's easy and you can finish it in a half hour, I would definitely do that first. That's another thing you can check off your list. Can you multitask? Some people are good at multitasking, others are not. Again, that depends on the activity. So this morning I was trying to do something while half listening to a webinar. I was making slides for another class. And that was kind of the webinar I didn't really have to be super focused on. I just had it in the background. So there's some things that you can multitask, some things you can't. Multitasking with friends and studying, that's okay, but you also want to figure out how serious your friends are in your study group. If you're not really doing a lot of studying, you might want to either whip them into shape or find a different study group. How many of you have the feeling, where you're worried that knowledge will fall out of your head immediately after lecture? Couple of you sometimes. That might be a good time to do your homework. If you have that time right after class, if you have no block. So some of you have noon to 1, Chem 115, and then you don't have lab until 2. Maybe you have a block of time in that 1 to 2 period. You can do some of that stuff, like knock it out, answer the questions. Yeah. Are you taking it right now? If you're not taking it, and if you you're worried about, let's say you're forgetting chemistry, you know what? If you learn it once, if you knew it then, it will come back pretty quickly. So you have to calculate moles sometimes in organic chemistry. If you forgot, that'll come back pretty fast if you knew it.
I don't remember all the things about acids and bases completely from 116. So.
And we also teach it different in organic chemistry because you're just dealing with protons. You're just shuffling a hydrogen back and forth. That's all acid-base reactions are. So yeah, if you've learned it once before, it'll come back faster. That's the same thing with this. When you are studying for your final exam at some point, 12 weeks from now, the stuff that you're learning right now, once you have it solidified, if you forgot it, that's okay, it'll come back. Because you're usually, for exams, students are filling up what we call the mental tub, right? And then you take your exam and then you pull the plug and then all of the knowledge falls out. So if you have a block of time between the classes and the next class where you can, solidify things, ask questions, or get things filled in, that one's gonna be good for you as well. Let's see what else I have here. Yes. If you're having a hard time in a subject, so let's say you're having a hard time with Chem 115, I'll use that one for example, or Bio 131 or 132, find out when the SI is, the SLA is, and put that in your calendar. Block off that time to go to there. Even better if you have these blocks of time where you're worried about things that you don't know about after lecture, put those questions down and make sure you bring them to the SLA. The best way to get your use out of SI and SLA or tutoring is to come with questions. Because if you just come in with, when I do review sessions, I make the students come up with questions. I'm not going to create a new worksheet. And that way, if you have a question, somebody else probably has the same question, and probably 4 people have the same question that they want to get answered, but nobody is willing to ask that. So make sure you ask the questions. All right, questions or comments there? Okay, where can you carve out pockets? So this is my lecture schedule, and this is fake things that I put in the schedule because, again, it depends on my level of focus or who I know is going to be in the hallway stopping by my office. I have to shift that as well. But these are other activities that I have. Updating Moodle sometimes can actually take 2 hours because it is so slow, especially yesterday when it wasn't working. That was great. Uploading videos, things like that. So if you can carve these pockets out, I know your schedules are probably more full than this and don't end at 9 o'clock, but there's different little pockets. Even on my days where Wednesdays I have a lot of classes, I could still fit in little pockets of time to do things. I say I have to take an hour for lunch, but realistically it's like 15 minutes. So even when I'm eating lunch, I'm working on a little bit here and there. So that's not, I wouldn't suggest always working through your lunch, but take some time for yourself, be sure to do that, but also carve in little pockets, especially those times that are between classes. Or how many of you don't have a class that starts until like really late? What's your earliest class on your late days? Noon? Is that for all of you? Noon? Yeah, some of you. Well, the late ones.
I have a 6 to 9, but earlier on in the day I have to go to class
At 9 a.m. Okay, so if you have a noon class, try to wake up a little earlier. Maybe, I don't know what time you guys wake up, like 9 o'clock instead of 10 or 11, because that's, hours wasting. Hopefully you're going also to bed at a somewhat reasonable hours so that you try to get 6 to 8, strive for the 6 to 8, or at least 4 to 5, 4 to 5 at least. Some people can function on 4 to 5 hours. One of my friends from graduate school, he does that, and he's a full-grown adult that still does it, but I do not function. So figure out what works for you. If you're dead tired all the time and you're sleeping 3 hours a day, you might want to try to get some more sleep in, especially if the majority of your time was spent doing nothing, or was Netflix an option? I don't know, streaming videos. But you want to think about how you can carve out little pockets there. All right. Okay. So some of you might be, if you graduated from high school with the 4.0 or higher, your GPA is probably stressing you out right now because maybe if you've had a quiz already, maybe you didn't do as well on it as you would liked. Don't let your GPA stress you out. It's there in the back of your head. I think the biggest gift for me, for my biology professor, was giving me a C, like my first semester. Because then, I was broke for the rest of it. I was not going to bust my butt and lose my sleep over trying to get a 4 point because I already lost it in the beginning. If you can do that, that's awesome. But if you don't, if you get an A-, your life is not over if you get an A- in a class or if you get a B in a class. The average GPA for Chapel Hill Medical School last year for incoming class was 3.4. They want not just students that have 4.0s and awesome scores on their MCATs, they also want well-rounded students. So focus on doing well in your classes, being engaged, doing your extracurriculars, getting your volunteer activities, but don't let your GPA drive you crazy. Also, when you go to get a job, most people don't put GPAs on their resume. There's not a line for GPA on there. I don't put mine on there because it's awful. So try to do well in your classes, but again, don't lose sleep if you didn't get the exact grade that you want. And if you fail, it's okay. We're at a school where people retake 115 all the time. Some people take it 3 times. It happens. And the nice thing about here for some of the beginning classes is that it's offered again next semester. So if you didn't do okay 115, you can do it again next semester. And if you want to be caught up with your incoming class and take organic in the fall, 116 sometimes is offered in the summertime. Or if you want to get ahead, summer organic is offered in the summer so you can get ahead and go to biochemistry. So if you fail, just deal with it, get on, do better the next time. Make sure you don't fail it again. If you fail it twice, then that could be maybe you need to change your major or something about your lifestyle. And we've also had that happen as well. And then also don't forget to celebrate your wins. So if you did really well on a quiz, then definitely celebrate that. And also explore your interest. All right. I keep going the wrong direction. Pro tip, go to class. Don't be a seat warmer. So come ready to learn. Again, ask questions in class. The professors don't know if you don't get it if you're not asking questions. Be an active learner. A lot of you are nodding heads, which I appreciate a lot. And then ask questions or add to other people's discussions. Okay. If you would like to share, what are some reasons, if you have skipped class, it doesn't have to be this one, if you have skipped class already, what are some reasons that one might skip class? Anybody? No dice? Yes.
I was late today to this class because I have English in room 304, and I was just sitting in there like waiting for class to start. There was a different class, and I'm like, I don't know these people. And a guy came in and was like, maybe my professor is just having somebody else like
Guest
over.
speaker.
And then the presentation was like on zoology or something. I was just like, where am I? And then I checked the app, and I was just like, oh, geez. Rooms down. So then I got up and went here.
So that's not quite skipping class, but maybe you were in the wrong room. So some other people skip class, hopefully not this one for sleeping in, but it could happen, 5 o'clock in the evening. Maybe you took a nap and forgot to set a timer or something. That's not quite sleeping in. But a lot of times people, I was watching some video and there was a student that decided just to skip class because she didn't feel like going. And like the one day that she skipped class, there was an extra credit pop quiz. And she ended up losing like 20 points that could have gone toward her grade at the end. So it could be things like that. I don't know that many faculty here that give pop quizzes, but on some days, yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure what happened to those kids, but there was a kid that didn't show up for class for 116 all year except for last. But something tells me he didn't pass the class.
It's possible. I have had that, or students that don't turn anything in. If you show up to lab and you don't turn in your lab reports, you get 0 points for showing up to lab. You don't get participation points unless you turn in your lab. So some people, I don't know that many faculty that give extra credit pop quizzes. However, if it's a Friday before break, like a spring break, which you guys won't have to worry about, or Thanksgiving break, which you don't have to worry about, students notoriously go home early. They take out classes Friday. They're like, I'm peacing out Thursday. See you later. So the students that are there Friday, so let's say I have a class of 50 and there are 16 people in class, I'll just throw some extra credit at them because they stayed for that day. So there's things like that. Maybe next year you'll have that problem to deal with. But just be aware that if you are missing out on things if you don't come to class. Okay, so what to study for? So you have a exam Friday. When do you start studying for a hard class? How early would you start studying for that? The previous Friday. Anybody else? Tuesday? So, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, keep up on your studies regularly.
Yep, yeah, so do a little bit every day, right? Do a little bit, and then you won't have to study as hard because it's easier to keep learning things every day than trying to cram everything in at night or the night before. So again, study for subjects in chunks of time. I know we talked last week about trying to change it up. So do chemistry for a little bit, do biology for a little bit, work on that English paper for a little bit, and allow yourself to forget. And that was that thing where if you learn it at one point, it'll be easy to recall it again. So if you forget about it for a little bit, you start to looking at it and then it's, oh, I remember that now. So, so space out your studying over time. So let's say that exam is on Friday. You want to start Tuesday or Monday. Just do a little bit of that every single day. Okay, so if you had a quiz or exam in classes, how did you do? I'm gonna try to get this one. It'll be like the last one, where it's on the wrong day. It'll be a pre-class activity. Okay, so some of you did really well, good or okay. Nobody responded with did not study. Some of you were very honest and said that you forgot to take it. I heard that was quite a few students in Chem 115. So that would be a good time to put that in your calendar that there was a quiz coming up. If professors are nice enough to send you an email reminder, read the email, check your email, especially if it says quiz today, definitely open that. All right. So it didn't sound like people were not studying or not prepared. So that's good. I'm glad that you guys had a good quiz, most of you. There's one person that had a bad quiz. All right, so for you, what does studying mean? How do you study? What does that mean to you guys? What's that? Oh. What does studying mean to you?
For me, it's kind of just looking over like my notes.
Looking over your notes? Is anybody a flashcard maker? A couple of you flashcard makers, that's good. And I was not good at that. It was too time consuming for me. So reading over your notes, for chemistry, at this point, you haven't done a lot of problems yet, but that's definitely gonna be how you study for chemistry later, is doing a lot of problems. You have the textbook, and I know your professor doesn't assign problems from the textbook because you have the online homework, but that's also extra problems that you can do. So if you were trying to do mole problems and it just wasn't clicking, you could find problems in that chapter, do those problems, and then I think usually the odd or even number something, it has answers in the back of the book, so you can check that. So use those kinds of things, even though there's not a lot of, I don't know, do you have reading assigned in 115? Not really. If you had reading assigned, or you have access to those problems, and that's worth a book itself. So have that, and then how many problems do you guys have to do for your online homework? For a chapter, let's say one chapter. 12? So it's reasonable.
Like, yeah, like whole thing parts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Each question has like multiple parts, but then there's one.
Have you guys heard stories about Dr. Uretsky? He's the crazy Russian. Some of you probably have him for lab. Yeah, he assigned, I think last year or the year before, like all of the problems. So there was like 80 problems in a chapter, and he would assign all of them, and then it was worth 10%. And I was like, come on, that's not fair. So 12 is reasonable. And depending on if you guys feel like you're spending 10, 12 hours per chapter on a homework, don't be afraid to tell Dr. Tamorian, like, this is taking up way more time than I feel. Get a poll, like ask your friends first to see if you're all spending like a ridiculously long amount of time and then somebody's taking 20 minutes, maybe they're just guessing or something. But if you feel like collectively it's taking a lot of time, like just come to her and be like, this seems like it's taking up a lot of time and it's not really teaching us anything extra. She's probably receptive to some feedback like that. I usually am. So I polled my class like 2 or 3 weeks in. I'm like, how long is homework taking you? If it's like, over 10 hours for a chapter, that's way too much time. Or 10 hours a week, that's a lot of time. So some people are rereading, highlighting, some make flashcards. When you study, let's say you're studying for a quiz, if you have access to a blank quiz or a previous version or even a practice one, you want to do that with all of your books closed, because you're forcing your brain to recall that information, which is going to help you study more, and then also helps you to fill out. You can circle that problem. That's where I need to go back and study again. And then you can print out that same blank one again after you've done some studying, and hopefully you know how to do it the second time around. All right, so some use this strategy of elaborating. So they explain things with lots of details, try to make connections to things. So if you're doing redox reactions, which you guys haven't done yet, I don't think we've gotten that far. So a reduction is the gain of electrons. Oxidation is loss of electrons. And then at some point you come up with a thing that's oil rig. Who remembers that from like high school? Yeah, oil rig. So oxidation is loss, reduction is gain. So you come up with little ways to remember things. If you have to write a song for yourself to remember how to go from Moletown to Granville, you do that. So elaborating that is one way to remember that. So for this one, you have one thing is always getting reduced and one thing in the reaction is always getting oxidized. So you can connect those two things together instead of remembering separately. Reduction is gain, oxidation is lost. Some people do interleaving, so they switch between ideas while studying. So instead of doing 25 of the problems, so I mentioned doing problems in the book, you don't have to do them in order because now you've trained your brain to do them in order. But if you do them out of order, then you're making your brain do different things, and that will help you studying and recall things as well. So repetition is important, but if you interleave and switch things around, that makes you think a little bit harder. It's not as automatic. So if you know that there's a whole bunch of these easy gram to mole, gram to mole, gram to mole questions to do, it will become too automatic, and then you won't, if you're throwing with something else, it won't make sense. So I mentioned taking exams in order. You don't have to take them in order, unless it's one question at a time on the screen. Try to think of concrete examples of things. So if you can make an example of it, it will make more sense to you and you will understand it better. Before you start making examples, you might want to check with a TA or professor to make sure you're getting the correct meaning before you do that. So what is the volume here? So most of you, if you're in 115, have done the measurement lab, I think up to this. I think all of 115 has done the labs now. So what would you say that volume was? Yeah.
21.6.
21.6. So where did you get the 0.6 from?
In between the two dotted.
So that was your uncertainty figure, right? And that uncertainty figure is the guess. And so some students have a hard time understanding what that means in terms of volume. So they just want to say, you know, this is 21.0. But we have that guess number. So the way that I use as an example is if you were working at a convenience store and some robbers came in, your guess to the cops is what is it? 5? Were they 5 feet or 6 feet? You can usually guess somewhere in between there. Were they closer to 5'8"? You know, 6 feet. So that last one is a guess. So this would be an example of, you know, trying to come up with an example of something to connect the dots there. All right, so dual coding, sometimes you can combine words and visuals or relate words and visuals and link them to text and then try to explain what it means in your own words. So something like this I use in organic chemistry. This is your acid-base reaction here. So there's a base, and you'll learn about Bronsted bases, which are proton acceptors. So this is going to accept this proton from here, and then these electrons go on to the H, or the A. This is the acid, which is a proton donor. So you guys will see this later in Gen Chem. In organic chemistry, you do a lot with arrow pushing, and so for some people, this looks like a fishing hook, right? These fish are the protons, so it's just going fishing for the proton. So it's things like that. Try to figure out what it makes sense to you in your own way, and that you'll be able to recall it better. Like I did have some students last year that would make up whole jingles for things, and that was always fascinating, but maybe you are that creative, perhaps not. Figure out what works for you. And mostly get organized. Figure out how you spend your time. Figure out a routine for yourself that works. And then like after you try it for a week, is it working for you? Do you feel rested? Do you feel like you're studying and being productive? Then keep doing the routine. If it's not, then readjust. And then do you feel like you never have enough time? And then reevaluate and say, do you actually not have enough time? So this week's assignment, you are going to keep track of your schedule for like the next week. So today until next, what is today, Tuesday, just so you can kind of fill out pockets of where you are spending your time. And so you for sure want to put in, you know, when you're in class, if you have work that you have to do, and then put in where you're studying. And if you find that like all day Saturday was watching some Mandalorian marathon or something on Disney Plus, then maybe you can put that in there. You don't have to. But then at least be aware for yourself how you're spending your time and see where you can do better about spending your time. All right, any questions? Yes, I have, I posted an Excel spreadsheet with kind of the thing already set up. So it's on the assignment page on Moodle. And so then you can just do that. One other thing, this is the wrong class. I had So there's 20, almost 30 of you between the two classes, and 5 people saved their name properly for their assignment. So please, it was most people's assignments were email a professor from last week. There was a lot of those. So make sure you follow the directions for saving your naming so that I can keep track of it and get the correct assignment back to the correct person. For next week, just keep track of your schedule. And then I think there's like 3 questions about how you're managing your time. And if you guys don't have questions, I will see you next week. So Chem Club meeting tomorrow. Pre-Professional Society tomorrow. Next Tuesday, we have a guest speaker about IPASS. She'll be talking to you about IPASS. Or IPASS. I'm not sure where this